So I guess my first question is, does everyone who has or wants to follow along have Visual Studio Code and GitHub Desktop installed?
Yes.
Does anyone not have it installed and want me to wait? It is okay if the answer is yes. Okay, the answer does not seem to be yes. Feel free to install it as I talk because you have a couple. Okay, so what we're going to be building today is a website. It's going to look super shitty, but it's going to be this. Uh, it's going to be a little responsive, but the cool part is we're actually going to host it on GitHub Pages. So I'm going to cover a lot of what might be really, really basic stuff for some people, but I'm going to try to cover everything really quick. So if you know all this stuff, cool. Hopefully you learn something interesting. Um, but if you've never done web development, I hope I cover enough for you to feel like you have a vague grasp. So let's make your first website. Uh, Next. No. There we go. So first, hi, I'm Joe Duncko. I'm a software engineer at Bridge AI. My focus at Bridge is making web apps, mostly using React. I also help co-organize Code Youngstown, which is kind of when you graduate YSU, you normally join Code Youngstown. We help people get jobs and network and do cool things in the Youngstown area. I helped run YPH, and so if you like YPH, I hope you like Code Youngstown. So Google us, join our Slack, all those kind of things. So today, what we'll be covering is how websites work, what Git and GitHub is, using a GitHub repository, creating a website, and hosting websites on GitHub Pages. What you'll need to follow along is Visual Studio Code, a GitHub account, and GitHub Desktop. So let's talk real quick about how websites work, because I've had a lot of really weird conversations with people who have tinkered with different levels of web and don't really have the basics down. So I'm just going to spend a couple minutes on that, and I'm sorry if this bores some people, but I think it's important. So a website requires two things: a client and a server. A server hosts HTML, CSS, JavaScript pages, or on like a web server, and it serves them via the internet to web browsers that request them. So if you're going to host a website somewhere, it needs to be on a web server. A website is made out of three things: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And I like this little thing that kind of explains what each one is for. So HTML is just kind of like the framework. So it like lets you display text and images on the page. CSS lets you adjust how those text and images are displayed and where they're displayed, and you can add color and animations and all kinds of things. But JavaScript lets you have like fine-grained control over like interactions. So think like submitting forms and like everything Facebook does, single page apps where you don't jump between different web pages. So everything real fancy you do with JavaScript. But today we're really only talking about HTML and CSS. Yeah. So if you've never done web development, this is what HTML looks like. It's kind of this nested you have these I don't even know how to describe this, but you have a more than and less than symbol, and inside those are you have your tag, which this is a nav tag, and then you can give different attributes. So inside this nav is this div, inside this div is another div, etc., and everything can be nested. So you have like this is called an unordered list, and then you have three list items inside of it. You know it's inside partly because it's indented, but also because this slash ul is the ending. So each one has a partner at the end. So start div, ending div, start nav, ending nav. CSS looks significantly different. You have you can specify different parts of your HTML to do styles on. So for example, this is what's called a class. So this is a class called screen reader text that you can say when an item is focused, you can give it different things like a background color, different font sizes, etc., etc. So you can do some really cool things with CSS, like animations, or just make text blue. It could be as complicated as you want. And then JavaScript also looks significantly different. This JavaScript more reflects a actual programming language. So for example, this bit of code does something when on links. So I guess when a link is clicked, it runs some code that looks like it runs a animation to fade out. And it maybe changes the window location. I just kind of grabbed this code from the internet, but the main takeaway here is that JavaScript, CSS, and HTML are what web pages are made out of, and each are pretty, I wouldn't say unrelated, but they're very different code. Okay, so let's talk about Git and GitHub. Git is a tool for doing version control. Normally do it from the command line, but there's cool tools like Github Desktop that let you do it from a user interface. Normally you use Git to store code in what's called a repository. Repositories contain branches, and branches contain commits. So as I'll show you later, commits are like changes you make to code. Branches are groups of changes, and repositories represent like this is a program that I'm doing work on, or how I'm storing it. And there's lots of different methodologies and processes, and everyone has a different opinion on how to use Git. But the important thing is that you use it at all for your version control, and everything you do should really be stored in some kind of version control. GitHub, which is a little bit different than Git, is a social network for programmers, more or less. It hosts Git repositories. So GitHub is one big Git server that you can store your Git repositories on. They also have really cool tooling for making issues, and this thing called pull requests, which basically let you contribute and work together to work on code. So I could make a pull request to another repository saying, "Hey, I made a change to your code. Can you include it?" So let's create your first repository. So you're going to log into GitHub, and you're going to go to the top right here and hit the new repository button. So I'm going to actually do that now. I don't know if I can see. I'm going to move my Discord to my other screen so I can see any messages. That way I can actually respond to them if they're texted or messaged. Okay, browser. This should be on my other screen. Sorry, I'm not used to live streaming stuff. New window. Okay, let's go to GitHub. That's work. That's GitHub. Okay, so we're going to create a new repository. So plus new repository. We're going to name it something. You can say my website. Don't need to give it a description. We're going to make it public for now. Let's add a README because every repository should have a README describing what it is. And you can ignore the rest of these. So we'll create one. And this is your repository. So this is all your code. So you notice that README that we had created is there. So what we're going to do is we're going to get this repository onto your computer. So we're going to hit the download code button and hit open with GitHub Desktop. So with any luck, your GitHub Desktop is already logged into your GitHub account and authenticated and all those terrible things. So you could just hit open with Desktop, push yes, say clone, which will actually put the files from GitHub onto your computer. And now we're here. So if you could look in the history and see that this is just the initial commit with the README. You can add changes here, type in a summary of any changes. There's none queued up here, a description, and you could actually do what's called a commit and save them.
Hey, Joe,
But for
I
now,
think you're
yep.
think your stream's a little messed up. You want to stop sharing your screen and start again. We're getting like, it's kind of like frozen in some parts of your screen.
Interesting. Let's.
Usually if you stop sharing and start again, it'll work.
Okay. Nope, wrong screen. Yes. Yes.
There we go. That's better.
Is it working now?
Yep.
We good?
Looks better. Thanks.
Okay. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to open our repository in our text editor, so you can go into repository and actually just hit open in Visual Studio Code. I'm going to make this full screen. Over here. And there we go. We have our repository open. I'm going to shrink that. So you can see our README, which is basically empty, and we're in our repository. So now I am going to ask, if anyone is following along, are you to this point? And so what I'm going to ask is is there like a presentation text thing?
Yeah, there's the questions for the presenters room.
Cool. Then in that case, for my own reference, I'm going to put here, if you're following along, put yes. I'm just trying to get an understanding of how many people are following along. Prompted you to download Git on VS Code. If it prompted you to download Git on VS Code, you could just say no. What that means is you're on Windows and you don't have Git installed. GitHub Desktop comes with its own version of Git. You can install it on your computer some other time, but GitHub Desktop takes care of those Git things. I don't even think it comes installed on Mac. I think you have to download something confusing as well, like the Mac developer tool thing. It's weird. Let's see, how much time do we have? Oh, we have plenty of time. Sweet. Okay, so I see 5 people are following along. So the next thing we're going to do is actually create our index.html. So you're going to right click, new file. We're going to call it index.html. It's very important you call it index.html. For historical reasons, index.html is the first page on your site. I don't know why. No one can tell me why. Actually, you could probably look up some blog post that explains why, but it's just how it is. So you're going to create a file called index.html. And what you're going to do is you're going to put my template in there. So I'm going to go and find the template I created. And I'm going to paste it in the chat. Hopefully it supports code. There we go. There's the template. So copy and paste that in here, and it should look like this. I'm going to make my font a little bigger for you all. So we now have our template. Give you all a second to do that. Once you have the template in here, I'll explain it real quick. Doctype HTML is just, there was different versions of HTML. Doctype HTML just tells it it's the latest. You surround all your HTML code with HTML, or you tell it what language it is. The head is where you put meta tags and other information about your site. So here, see these meta tags, which is just kind of configuration for your site. So this just tells it what character set to use. This viewport stuff will make it so the website scales on mobile correctly. Title will be what appears in the title of your website, so like in the tab. Description, that's more for search engines, but it's important to put, I think. Style is where we're going to put our CSS, and body is where we're going to put our content. But before we get to that, what we're going to do is we're going to install a plugin for VS Code called, I think it's called Live Preview. Let's see if I remember. It's called Live Server. So you want to install this one right here called Live Server. You hit this blocky button, you go to Live Server. There should be like an install button here or here. You click install, and it should install pretty quick. Once everyone has that installed, can I get some yeses in the chat? I just want to make sure. Cool. Okay, so now that you have it installed, let's go back to your index.html. You're going to hit the shortcut Control-Shift-P. Control-Shift-P opens up this fancy, I think it's called the command palette. That's why it's P. And you're going to search for Live Server. And we're going to hit Open with Live Server. And that should open a new tab in your browser. I'm going to put that next to my code. That's actually a live, where did it go? There it is. That's actually a live preview of your code. So I'm gonna just to show you how live that is, when I save, it actually shows the text I just typed there. Yeah. So now we have, I'm gonna check that. We have some cool tooling here. We can type HTML here. We can have it spit out onto this page here. So what we're going to do is we're going to first create our our content. So let's create an H1. And H1 is the first header of your page. So I'm going to just call it Joe's website. If I save that, you're going to see this big title here. I'm going to create an H2, like a tagline. So, hi, I'm Joe. Welcome to my site. You'll see that H2s are slightly smaller than H1s. And now I'm going to create some sections. I'm going to have a section. I'm going to do it like an H3. I'm going to call it like About Joe. I'm going to create another H3. And let's call this one Joe's Hobbies. There we go. So we have our H3s, which are slightly smaller. Under our H3, let's throw a paragraph. So paragraph is just the P tag. I'm going to write a little bit about myself. So Joe is a software engineer at Bridge AI. He helps out with Code Youngstown. So if I save that, you can see I have some text under my About Joe. And now under hobbies, let's throw a unordered list. So this will just be a list of hobbies. So that's the UL tag for unordered list, and then LI for every item. So let's say I like video games. I don't know, anime. I don't know what else I like. Coding. Yeah, so there we go. We have some items here. Does everyone have their content on their site written out? Doesn't have to be anything amazing. But the idea is to show off some various tags. Cool. Let's see. I'm looking at my cheat sheet right now. So next, let's add an image. So on the top of my page, I'm going to add an image tag. And what we're going to do is on your computer, let's go find a image and put it in this folder here. So where is my cheat sheet? So am I able to just grab that and put it in here? So I have an image somewhere else. So I'm going to just put it, here's a picture of me. I am going to put it in my, could be a picture of anything, it doesn't matter. We're just going to put a picture in there. We're going to put it in the same folder. And we're going to refer to it with the source attribute. Source equals This is Joe Duncko. I actually have cool autocorrect stuff, so that just worked. And we're going to give it an alt tag for accessibility reasons. So I'll say it's just Joe. So if you notice, this just showed up real big. Big Joe, yes. Cool. So now let's get to styling, because we have a really ugly site. We have this super ugly font and this giant picture of Joe. So we're going to do a couple things. First, let's fix that horrible font. We're going to put the font on the whole body. So your styles go here. So we're going to type out a body tag. So this just refers to the whole body. So you see your body tag. This refers to the whole thing. And we're going to do the font family. We're just going to do sans serif. So that's not a specific font. That just means whatever the default font for the system that is sans serif, just throw it in there. So we don't have any of those. Makes it a slightly nicer font most of the time. Cool. Next, let's fix the profile picture. So I'm going to give this profile pic an ID of PFP, profile pic. IDs, somebody message. I don't know where the message went.
Someone just joined. Sorry.
Gotcha. So IDs you refer to with hashtag symbols. So we're going to say PFP. We're going to give it a height of 200 pixels. Let's see, make it all nice and small. I'm zoomed in, so it's a little bit big. Let's also make it a little fancy with a border radius. Border radius. Just say 20px, because I know that does a nice, there we go, some nice rounded edges there. So let me zoom out here. Cool. So now we have this nice left aligned site. How are we doing on time? Well, we have a whole 10 minutes. Sweet. Okay, so let's group together our content in divs, just kind of for organization purposes. So let's create a div. A div is kind of a group of content, is kind of the best way to describe it. And it has implications for spacing. So let's add a section, and let's call this one ID equals header. Let's create another one. And let's have this one be ID equal, or let's make this one a class. Call it a section. We're going to create a second section here as well for our hobbies. Okay. So what we're going to do for our header, let's center everything in there. So hashtag header, herder. Why do I keep wanting to write that? Text align, center. There we go. Centered everything there. That looks much nicer. And the next thing I want to do is let's make it so that this is a little more responsive. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to refer to the class. So periods help you refer to classes. So we're going to say section. We're going to make it width 50%, so they take up to half the page. And let's give it a minimum width of, say, 300 pixels. So that way it will bump down when we do the next part, which is making this responsive. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a div around both these sections. And let's give it the ID of sections, plural. And we're going to do something that's called a Flexbox. And Flexbox is a way of aligning parts of your site.
Bro, I
So
can
you
finish
can-
your paper. You can't finish my programming assignment.
Somebody has.
Hey Ryan, do you mind muting him?
4 hours video. Who cares? Yeah, there is soup. You want some soup?
Is somebody able to mute him?
Want some soup?
That'd be cool.
I'll have some.
Yeah,
Thank
there
you.
you go. Thank you.
So you don't have to know exactly what's going on here, but you're just going to have to trust me. We're going to turn on Flex with Display Flex. We're going to set Flex Wrap to Wrap, and we're going to justify our content center. What that's going to do is that's going to make it so that Display Flex makes it so divs display next to each other. Flex Wrap makes it so when it gets to a certain when things get to their minimum width, which we just set to 300 pixels, they bump down, and Justify Content Center centers it. So now we have a nice little centered page.
Hey, Joe. What are divs? What does the div tag do?
Which, any of them? Oh,
yeah,
man.
like why do you use div tags?
Why do you use div tags?
Yeah.
Oh man, that's like a philosophical question.
No,
so
yeah,
divs are what are called block elements. They let you group content together so you can do stuff with it. This, if you notice how this is grouped up, is that this section here is a div and this section here is a div. And if you notice, they kind of stick together. So when one drops under, they drop by divs. And you can get real complicated. You could have like hundreds of divs on a page and then like move around in real fancy ways, especially with like Flexbox. But basically divs allow you to kind of do what we just did, and that is group things together.
Thank you
If
for
you're
humoring
curious,
me.
yes. If you're curious to see what exactly a div looks like, you can right click and inspect in your browser and bring up your element inspector, and you can actually hit a div, click a div, and you can see that it's this block that is this height and width that was there. You can see that it could have a border, a margin. So there's some cool things you can do in the inspector that gives you a better idea of like how this website actually functions. But considering we have 3 minutes left, we can leave that for questions after, because I don't want to impose on Nick's time. So yeah, now that we have our website, we're going to go into GitHub Desktop. You can see that it remembers our changes that we just made, assuming you saved them. Please make sure you save them. Make sure I saved. Did I not save? Yeah, I did. So we're going to make a commit that is just, I don't know, it's an arbitrary name right now, but we'll say like init website. And we're going to commit it to our main branch and push it to the origin. So now what we did is we committed it on our machine, and then we're pushing that to GitHub. So now if we go back to GitHub, so if I normally get there from a repository view on GitHub. Let me open this. You can now see that our new code and the picture is on GitHub. Is there anyone not to that point where your code and is now on GitHub? And do you need help? Let's do it the other way around. If your code is in your GitHub, please say yes. Sweet. Okay, so now let's get our code onto the internet. So you're going to hit settings here. You're going to scroll down a bunch, and we're going to use GitHub Pages, which is GitHub's awesome way of putting websites that are static, so no backend, just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, onto the internet. So we're going to hit source being our main branch, just the root, and save it. So save. So if we scroll back down here, it should have, I actually have my domain hooked up to my GitHub account. So mine hosts on github.com, or excuse me, joeduncko.com, but yours should host somewhere on GitHub. It should just give you a domain. And for sanity's sake, you can force HTTPS. But yeah, you should have a link now that this is your website. You can go and share this to people and modify it and make more commits. So if you made a website, I guess I didn't change my name, post it in the chat, and that's my talk. Yeah.
What are some good resources to continue learning about this?
Thank you, Andrew.
No, yeah,
That's actually-
I'm actually curious too, because I'm probably missing stuff as well.
Yeah. So kind of the next steps, you should look at the CSS frameworks. I suggest Bootstrap. It makes it so that you don't have to make as many CSS decisions. And it kind of gives you a framework of like, here's what you could do with a website. Bootstrap's awesome. You could add JavaScript to this site. You could do, but there's not much to do with it now, but looking in the JavaScript would kind of be a good step. After that, you could look in the JavaScript frameworks like React. There's Vue, Angular. Thank you, Andrew. If you want your website to be able to communicate with a backend, you want to look into what are called Restful Apis. But I'm not going to try to explain them to you now, but just know that if you Google that, there's a whole world of resources. And then another thing to look into, I suggest looking into Node.js. You can use it to write JavaScript that runs on the back end. You could use it for hosting websites. There's a lot of cool things you could do with Node. But if you go the web development route, which is what I did professionally, and you kind of go down this list, you end up using Node for a lot of your projects. So I definitely recommend that. Somebody asked, what would you put on your website? How would I put any projects I've completed onto my website? You would use a link tag, which I didn't, but I am basically out of time. I am going to link you to my website, my personal website, as well as my website's GitHub repository. And then I'll also link you to the anchor tag example on W3 so that you know how to do that.
All right. Well, thank you very much.